Hey, what's up, everybody? BDO44 coming at you another video. All right, so I can take a break from a few things that I've been talking about on the channel and get back to a little basketball right now. And this is not one of those conversations where I'm here to break down anything real. I was just listening to a conversation that Gilbert Arenas was having in regards to Jokic and Shaq on his platform, and Rashad McCants and the crew were trying to more or less figure out who's been more dominant in these finals. Who's been more dominant in the finals, taking Shaq's entire body of work in the finals and weighing it against Jokic's games in these finals thus far. And they're essentially saying Jokic's numbers, not necessarily comparing them in volume, but just the way that Jokic is accumulating what he's doing in the finals. He's getting assists, he's getting rebounds, he's getting points, and he's doing it in a way that makes it so that he can be considered as dominant or more dominant than Shaquille by way of what it is he's also overall contributing to his team. Now, my argument is not about whether or not Jokic and Shaq compare in terms of dominance. I think the one thing that's being left out of that equation is Shaq did that 4 times. Shaq was dominant in the finals every time he went to the finals, with the exception of the Orlando loss to Houston and of course us losing to Detroit. And he was still rather dominant in those series. I think Jokic, when you want to compare Jokic to Shaq, you're going to have to tell Jokic to do it 4 more times. That's the key to that conversation. It's not necessarily about whether or not the styles are comparable to one another, or if you want to say Shaq's style is more dominant than Jokic. All of that is really up for debate based on what we're literally seeing, with Jokic averaging like 30 points, 20 rebounds, 10 assists, something like that. He really is being as dominant as any center ever has in the final series. But this is just one series against that Heat team. Shaq did it against New Jersey Nets. He did it against the Philadelphia 76ers. He did that against the Indiana Pacers. Obviously, won the championship in Dallas against against the Dallas Mavericks for the Heat. I mean, you just got to do it more. You can't send Jokic at me in 4 games of the finals and compare him against the dominance, the consistent dominance of Shaquille O'Neal throughout the course of entire finals career. No. That's where the conversation has to separate the two of the players. Tell Jokic to do it several more times. Then we can come back around saying how he's more dominant than the big fella. Now, whether or not the big fella had as many intangibles in his game as Jokic, no. It's almost like comparing Joel Embiid to Jokic. It just doesn't make any sense, because a lot of these guys that we're talking about, they didn't assist like that. They weren't responsible for making plays for their entire team like a point guard. You know what I mean? Jokic's game, once they realized that was his game, the Denver Nuggets catered their entire offense around him. They didn't even need to look for a facilitator, a point guard, or nothing. You know what I mean? So it's like people have to allow for certain things in regards to the differences in circumstances that lead up to those players displaying what they display. And at the end of the day, when you use the word dominance, if you're talking about Shaquille, physically, he defined the word. Maybe he didn't accumulate as many stats as Jokic, because Jokic is obviously able to use the pass in ways that Shaq was not able to. But Shaq was able to dominate the paint in ways that Jokic was not able to. And did so much dominance in the paint that he was able to accomplish almost as much as Jokic does, passing, dunking, laying the ball up, shooting threes. Shaq was doing all that from the free throw line in the paint. So when you consider who's more dominant, a lot of times one would think diversifying would make it so that would define the conversation. But when you look a little closer, you realize Shaq is actually doing as much with less, which would then make him more dominant, one would think. So in the equation I'm saying is, if Jokic was as dominant as Shaq, he's probably doing even more than he is. He's probably giving you 35, 15 assists and 20 rebounds. Like, you see what I'm saying? Because he has to elevate based on the centered nature of what Shaq's dominant actually is, as opposed to the various different tools that he has to go to naturally that Shaq didn't have. So who's more dominant? You know, I think that the person who's more dominant is the guy who was able to do more with less. I'm going to go with Shaq. Because if Shaq had the ability to rebound and pass and shoot threes, he'd average 55 points. And And if he had the assist ability, he too would have been able to pass and all of that. So is Jokic more naturally basketball talented and more skilled? Yes. But to say he's more dominant, you can't tell it to somebody who watched him his whole career. I watched him. So you're not going to be able to run that on me. You know what I mean? No disrespect to Jokic, but you just can't run that on me. And I think most people who grew up on Shaq will tell you the same thing. And if you grew up on Shaquille, you would also understand the context in which I'm speaking with a great deal of confidence. Because that's how truly dominant he was. We talk about the word dominance. He extended his dominance to the physical nature of the game, which really truly defines your dominance. When you dominate somebody, usually you're physically controlling. That's what Shaq did. He pushed people around. Triple teams, he dunked on triple teams. Double teams, they were not there. Single coverage, you shouldn't do that. That's how bad it was with Shaq. And there's nothing like that in the league today. So they're looking for comparisons to Shaq, and it's usually people who didn't watch Shaq trying to do this. If you watch Shaq, you'd understand it's futile. Because the reality is, if Shaq was on the floor while Jokic is doing this, Jokic would be in trouble because Jokic would be in foul trouble trying to stop Shaq. It's not like AD. It's not like trying to stop Bam. It's not like, you know what I'm saying? It's not like that. You have to stop him physically, or he's going to repeatedly continue to attack your paint and be successful. That is what Shaq did. He you know, your 3-point shot may fall. You make an assist. Your guys may make the shot. They may not. You see what I'm saying? Jokic is more reliant on other people to succeed than just Shaq. Shaq didn't need his whole team to necessarily succeed. He was an entire offense. You dumping the ball in the paint, dribble, turn around, score. Other way. You know what I mean? Jokic needs to pass the ball. There's a lot of different things that makes Jokic as dominant as he is. And if his teammates can't shoot, that dominance goes away. Put Jokic on a team with a bunch of dudes who can't shoot. Tell me how many assists is he going to get? You know what I'm saying? How open is his game going to be now? And when you take Jamal Murray, Porter, KCP, remove them, put some different players that aren't as good. And then tell me how effective that dominance actually is. Because now you have to, he's making other people better, which in actuality is a better thing because obviously it's basketball. You want a team sport to ultimately make everyone better, probably have a better chance of winning the game. But at the end of the day, if we're talking about singular dominance, one player who's more dominant than the other, then we got to consider what it takes for that person to be dominant. Shaq don't need nothing. He can get a bunch of guys who are not very good and still get the same numbers. That's the difference. You can put him on a team with a bunch of guys that can't shoot. He probably ain't going to win a championship. But in terms of him dominating the game, he don't need none of them dudes to play well in order for him to dominate the game. You can crowd him out with 4 people. He can still get scores. That's what people got to understand. You can send your whole defense at him. If he's already in his spot, you're either going to foul him or he's going to score on you. He ain't going to miss no chippies. He called it barbecue chicken. His touch was fantastic. So he has layups, jump hooks, curls, black shadows, great footwork on the black shadow, meaning his spin move, he's as fast as a guard when he spins off of you. And then when he dunks the ball, there's nothing like it in the history of the sport. There's nothing like it. He's going to dunk the ball harder than all humans. That's the problem. All humans. So when you try to envision what Shaquille is talking about in regards to how he plays, or you're trying to envision what we're talking about, you have to ignore everything you're seeing in this era because they don't even allow you to be as physical as Shaq could have been in this era. They don't even allow it. Now Shaq would be called for an offensive foul every time he tried to do a black shadow because somebody would be flopping off of him each time. So I don't know how effective Shaq would be in this era in comparison to what Jokic is doing because the Jokic is more so fit for this era. But Jokic, he would have dominated Shaq's era too. But when he gone up against Shaq, he would have needed another person or two to try to guard him. Because if he tried to guard him for any reason at all, it's foul trouble. And that's what Jokic doesn't have to worry about in any of these playoffs. Anthony Davis wasn't aggressive enough offensively to really make that a thing. You know what I mean? And some of the other guys, Karl Towns, they couldn't do nothing with the Joker in that way to make him have to get off the floor. But he's the center on his team. So he would have to directly guard Shaq. It would not work. It would not work. Now, granted, Shaq would have a hard time guarding him in the perimeter and all that other stuff. Styles would mess with one another, so you guys know that. But at the end of the day, when we're talking about more dominant, Shaq can do more by himself thus making him singularly more dominant. In my opinion, he can do more by himself, and so that's how I equate it. At the end of the day, Shaq is likely going to be able to succeed with less than Jokic, in my opinion. And when it comes down to the eye test and talking about what you see, that will never compare. You're never going to say Jokic is more dominant than Shaquille if you actually watch a Shaq game and then a Jokic game. You ain't gonna even have that conversation. You're gonna respect Jokic's style, and you're gonna agree that he dominated. But you're gonna look at Shaq and say that man punished people. He punished them bad. They walked out of there hurt, trying to guard that man, and they're probably afraid to guard him again. They probably don't want to even play Game 6 because they're gonna have to guard that dude. That's how that goes. So I just wanted to let people know, as somebody who grew up on Shaq, as well as somebody who believes he understands the game pretty well as it pertains to what Jokic brings to the table and just exactly how dominant it is. I don't think the comparison's crazy. That's what I'm here to tell you. The styles contrast, but when you start talking about who's the greatest centers and who's going to finish as the greater center, Jokic has a chance. He really has a chance, man. So I'm not going to sit here and poo-poo that, but we're talking about the word dominant. And we're talking about what that actually describes. And when I tell you that there's never been anyone more dominant than Shaquille in this league, I said it with a lot of confidence. EDL 44. I thank you all for watching.